everyone, in this video we will be looking at factorizing quadratic expressions. The quadratic expression is an expression of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is not equal to 0. A is the coefficient of the x squared term, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c is the constant term. As you would have seen before, some quadratic expressions can be factorized by taking out a factor and using a single bracket. Others need a double bracket. So this is actually factorizing quadratic expression, but this is when you have only two terms, right? What we would call a binomial expression, because it only has two terms. But what makes it quadratic is the fact that it has an x squared term, a square term. So an example like this, we would factor out the x and divide each term by x and put the remainder in the bracket, right? So x into x squared leaves x, x into 7x leaves 7. Another example, if we have 12x squared minus 8x, then our common factor would be 4x. So of course you would take out the 4x and divide each term by 4x. 4x into 12x squared, that's 3x, and 4x into 8x, that is 2, right? And negative 2. Another example, we have 9p squared minus 3p. 3 is common, p is common, so 3p would be our common factor. 3p into 9p squared is 3p, and 3p into 3p is 1. So we would have 3p multiplied by 3p minus 1. And the final example, we have 8q plus 20q squared. Common factor would be 4q. And of course, we divide each term by the common factor and put the remainder, well, not the remainder, the quotient in the bracket. Alright, so that was a quick run through of simple factorization in terms of quadratic expressions. Alright, so now we're going to look at factorizing quadratic expressions, trinomial expressions, meaning the one that has three terms. So ax squared is one term, bx is one term, and c is another term. The simplest quadratic expression factorized is when the coefficient of x squared is 1. When the coefficient of x squared is 1, then we write the double brackets with the x's in the usual position. Find two numbers whose product is AC. So in this case, 1 times 12, and whose sum is B. Sum or difference, right? In this case, it's sum. So two numbers, what two numbers, when you multiply them you get 12, and when you add them you get the 7 in the middle. What you should do, some of them are plain and simple, but some of them you have to play around with the options, right? So 3 times 4 is 12, 3 plus 4 is 7. So in a bracket, you just put 3 in one bracket and 4 in the next bracket, and you would have factorized that quadratic expression. Let's say you have this example, x squared minus 6 plus 8. So AC would be 8, right? And B would be negative 6. So when the middle term alone is negative, the two factors must be negative. So that when you multiply them, you get the positive AC, and when you add them, you get the negative. So negative 4 times negative 2 gives you 8. And negative 4 plus negative 2 gives you 6. Negative 4 times negative 2 is equal to 8. Because a negative times a negative is positive. And negative 4 plus negative 2 is equal to negative 6. Because if you add negative to other negative, then you end up with more negatives, right? So once the middle term alone is negative, your two factors will be negative. So you just open a bracket, put in your x's, your two factors are negative 4 and negative 2. You put 1 in each bracket, and that one is done. And then we have x squared plus 4x minus 12. So that means AC would be negative 12. So you want two numbers, when you multiply them, you get negative 12. And when you add them or subtract them, you get 4, the middle term. So we know that 3 times 4 gives us 12. The fact that we need AC to be negative, it means one of the factors should be negative and one should be positive. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12, but when we add them, we're not going to get 4, so that's out. 6 times 2 gives us 12, and the 6 minus 2 gives us positive 4. So that sounds like our two factors, 6 and negative 2. So in our bracket we're gonna have x minus 2 and x plus 6.